Good evening and welcome. It is time once again for CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana 104.5 FM. I will be your host for this evening. My name is Mr. Garza, and I'm here to let you know that WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign community. Views expressed are those of the speakers and are not intended to represent WRFU, UCIMC, or, as we like to say on the televised version of this show, UPTV. These views are our own, and by our in this instance, I mean myself and anyone whose words I might be reading when I read news stories. So, this is going to be kind of a hodgepodge episode of different things. It is, I'm recording this towards the end of February. And I wanted to include something that I talked about at the last CU Immigration Forum monthly meeting, which is generally what's ahead for immigration. And then I'll talk about a number of other things as well, but I just wanted to share some of that because I did some research on the topic, and I thought that it might be interesting for the show. So one thing that I commented on was there was a meme that I saw going around on social networks services. It says, "Nation shocked after Biden unable to undo all 4 hours of work Trump did as president." And while that is funny and a good poke at a president who really just wanted to play the part of a president on TV and also to have power that went along with it, but he didn't really want to do much in the way of work, it unfortunately also captures a way that people tend to think about presidential elections, which is get the bad guy out or the guy that I don't like so much and get the good guy in. And you notice I'm using the term guy because that's how most people tend to look at it. But get the bad person out and get the person we like in, and then our job is done. And we can forget about it until 4 years from now when we start complaining about what is or isn't happening that we don't like. But it doesn't really work like that. Biden can no more wipe the slate clean of the stain of Trump than Trump was able to undo the legacy of Obama. And believe me, he tried very hard. So I don't think we can realistically talk about what we have to look forward to until we take a look at what all must be undone just in order to get us back to where we were 4 years ago, which wasn't that great a place, if you remember it. So in order to create a truly humane and progressive immigration policy, Biden must overcome the direction immigration law has been enforced for far longer than Trump was in power. But first, let's take a look at what Biden's done so far. He signed, mostly it's executive orders. He signed an executive order on the revision of civil immigration enforcement policies and priorities. This order revokes an executive order issued by President Trump, which made sanctuary jurisdictions that did not comply with immigration enforcement measures ineligible to receive federal funding. So that's going or gone. He signed an executive order on ensuring a lawful and accurate enumeration and apportionment pursuant to the decennial census. This requires that all residents of a state be counted in the census regardless of immigration status. So this right here is something that's like, that's the way it's been since the census began. That's how it worked. And Trump was trying to change that. So signing that executive order just returns us to the status quo. It doesn't move us ahead in any way. And similarly, the other executive order about sanctuary cities doesn't actually get us anywhere. It just keeps us from going to a bad place. And most of them are like this. He did a proclamation on ending discriminatory bans on entry to the United States. And this revokes the so-called Muslim ban, right, which restricted foreign nationals from 7 predominantly Muslim countries from entering the U.S. Again, back to zero, back to the starting point. Preserving and fortifying deferred action for childhood arrivals, or DACA, directs the Department of Homeland Security to strengthen the regulation, which defers the removal of certain undocumented immigrants who were brought to the U.S. as children. Again, resetting everything back to zero. Proclamation on the termination of emergency with respect to the southern border of the United States and redirection of funds diverted to border wall construction. Halts construction and funding of the so-called border wall. Again, resetting everything back to the starting point. Executive order on the establishment of Interagency Task Force on the Reunification of Families. This establishes a task force aimed at reuniting children who American authorities separated from their families on the border between January 20th, 2017 and January 20th, 2021. This doesn't even set us back to zero. It just starts the process of trying to fix something that was severely broken under the Trump regime. So that can't just wipe that away all at once. That's just a starting point for working on that problem. An executive order on creating a comprehensive regional framework to address the causes of migration, to manage migration throughout North and Central America, and to provide safe and orderly processing of asylum seekers at the United States border. This directs the administration to address the root causes of migration from Central America, as well as the Secretary of Homeland Security to review the Trump administration's Migrant Protection Protocols program, under which asylum seekers in the U.S. are sent to Mexico to await court appearance. Again, this is the first one that actually kind of seeks to move forward in a different direction. It will be a bit of undoing damage Trump did, but it also attempts to move us forward a little bit towards dealing with a problem in a smart way, rather than just saying, hey, let's put up a wall and tell all these people, too bad, you can't come here. We don't want you. Instead, it seeks to try to solve the problem at its cause. So this is the first forward-looking piece in terms of let's try to do something new here. Executive order on restoring faith in our legal immigration systems and strengthening integration and inclusion efforts for new Americans. This reestablishes a task force on new Americans, requires agencies to review recent immigration policies and streamline the naturalization process, and revokes the Trump memorandum enforcing the legal responsibilities of sponsors of aliens. So this is like the earlier one on family reunification. This is attempting to start the process of fixing something that Trump broke in a very big way, and try and resolve some of those problems and again, just start to bring them back. Whoa, excuse me, I'm gesticulating wildly and I hit my microphone. Start to bring them back to where they were before Trump came along and started stumbling around and breaking things. So that's just a few of the things that Biden has done so far, and a little sense of where those things take us or where they're intended to take us. So like I said, most of these executive orders do not create any immediate changes, but they give the DHS, the Justice, and the State Departments a direction and a sort of roadmap for how to create their own plans for undoing Trump's agenda. So it's a beginning. And as the new press secretary said, quote, "We want to put in place an immigration process here that is humane, that is moral, that considers applications for refugees, that considers applications for people to come into this country at the border in a way that treats people as human beings. That's going to take some time. It's not going to happen overnight," end quote. And that's a really good point. It is not going to happen quickly. So activists, immigration activists here, telling myself and sort of spreading the word to others, we're going to have to be very patient here. There's a lot that's been messed up, screwed up, altered in some way or another in a way that is negative and hurtful to immigrants. And it's going to take a lot of time to sort through that and undo it. And a case in point, after a Texas judge temporarily blocked President Biden's order to pause deportations for 100 days, immigration agents used the brief window to defy the incoming president's new tone and push through quite a few deportations that were in the works. So, if you recall, Trump inspired a lot of pretty awful people to join in groups like ICE and Border Patrol, and or encouraged people that were there who already had bad tendencies and pushed them towards an extreme view of what they were doing or what they were supposed to be doing. And those people are not gone. They're all still there, all still doing the same job. For example, videos celebrating Mr. Trump's big, beautiful border wall are still featured on the Customs and Border Protection website. A fictionalized video by the agency that shows Mr. Trump's depiction of migrants as feared criminals is still on the Border Patrol's official social media channel. And the union representing ICE agents, whose top leaders were enthusiastic supporters of Mr. Trump, has signaled that it does not intend to accept all of the new administration's reversals of his policies. So in the final days of Trump's administration, Trump loyalists tried to codify the influence of those unions. The day before Mr. Biden's inauguration, union leaders signed a labor agreement with Ken Cuccinelli. We all know him, and we've heard his name many times before, who was then the acting deputy secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, that requires ICE's political leadership to consult with the union on policy decisions. Now, this agreement does not stand. It's been rejected by the administration, but there could be court challenges involved. But as our other not so good friend Stephen Miller is quoted as saying, quote, "They are not going to be able to get people to change their deeply held convictions. They are going to make painfully clear to the politicals what the consequences are going to be if their advice is not followed." So this kind of emboldened resistance is not limited to Homeland Security agencies. Pockets of government employees loyal to Trump and his agenda remain ensconced in other parts of the bureaucracy. And that is and will be a big problem going forward. So the immigration system is effectively two separate systems. One that deals with legal immigrants and another with those who are not authorized to be in the country. The vast majority of immigrants living in the United States came here legally. Only about a quarter of the foreign-born are unauthorized. The overall population of legal immigrants has been growing, while the population of unauthorized immigrants has been shrinking. Under the leadership of Stephen Miller, again, administration officials have been ordered to, quote, "close every opening, shut every door, close every loophole, and then some," according to a quote by a senior Department of Homeland Security official. So since Trump took office, his administration enacted some 450 mostly technical executive actions that have disfigured the system beyond recognition. Some changes rig the criteria for who counts as a good immigrant so that virtually no one qualifies. Some essentially try to trick still eligible applicants into filling out their paperwork incorrectly. Yet others involve the government simply failing to process applications or issue new documents. So that's kind of where we are right now. That's the situation that we're facing as advocates for immigrants. And it gives you kind of a sense of how difficult it's going to be to move forward. It's easy enough. I, in my day job, run a nonprofit organization. I have lots of volunteers that I work with. And I can tell you without fear of contradiction that it is very easy to uh, tell people what they're supposed to be doing and how they ought to do it. That's very easy. It's not even a remotely difficult part of my job. The hard part is following through on that or following up on that and actually getting people to do things that way and to get them to understand why they're supposed to be doing it like that. Um, that is the difficulty of working with people is sharing your vision, um, not just not sharing it. I mean, sharing it is easy enough, but getting people to understand it and or care about it and or share it uh, themselves. I mean, you can share your ideas, but getting someone to share them with you is really difficult. And I think it's going to be even harder in this instance because even though these are employees in many instances, and you can actually give a directive and say, all right, from now on, here's how we do things. Anybody that's had a low level job in anywhere, like a fast food place or something like that, is probably familiar with the receipt of all sorts of instructions, pep talks from the management, and all that kind of thing. And then as soon as they go away, you just do things your own way and hope not to get caught or try to not get caught. And that's kind of the way a lot of systems work. And with government being as huge and widespread as it is, with so many layers and levels of control, it's really, really difficult. So I am trying very hard to lower my expectations. I know that the administration has proposed some immigration overhaul ideas to Congress. I suspect it's going to be a really, really difficult job getting anybody to go along with those. I hope they do. They've got some great ideas, but it's not going to be easy. So anyway, that's kind of the gist of what I was talking about at the meeting last month or earlier this month that you may have missed. So from that point, I'd just want to move on to some general news. This story is entitled "Bail Bond Firm Duped Immigrants into Wearing Shackles and Paying to Have Them Removed," according to the feds. So here is an example of somebody is taking advantage of the system and apparently getting away with it until somebody comes along and says, hey, you can't do that. And there are probably many, many more instances of this kind of thing out there than what we know about. But let me read this story. So the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau alleges a company duped U.S. immigrants into wearing electronic tracking bracelets and paying thousands of dollars in fees in hopes of getting them removed. A lawsuit announced by the agency on Monday, which was joined by the Attorneys General of Massachusetts, New York, and Virginia, says the company Libre by Nexus, for years has been preying on immigrants held in federal detention centers. According to the complaint, Libre's primary business is offering to put up the money detainees need, often nearly $10,000, as a bond to gain release while they wait for trial, which can often take as long as 3 years. In return, Libre required clients to wear what it says were GPS tracking bracelets and pay a monthly fee of $420. In reality, the bracelets often did not have functioning GPS capabilities, the government said. The suit also alleges that Libre's clients often thought the fees they were paying were going toward the original bond, when in fact none of the payments were. Libre's bonds, which the suit says were paid by third parties, were repaid by the government when Libre's clients returned for their trials. Libre's fees translated to an annual interest rate of about 57% for its bail bond loans, which many of its customers struggled to pay, according to the complaint. The suit also says that Libre often threatened to re-detain or deport consumers for non-payment, even though, as a private corporation with no connection to the government, it had no authority to do so. Libre ensures these vulnerable immigrants are hamstrung from achieving the American dream right out of the gates, CFPB Acting Director Dave Uhio said Monday in a call with reporters. Libre is acting as a middleman between immigrants and bail bondsmen, not as the actual lender, and extracting unfairly high fees for that service. Today's actions show that financial scams that target immigrants and increase the ethnic and racial divide in America will not be tolerated. The CFPB and prosecutors in Massachusetts, New York, and Virginia also sued Nexus CEO Mike Donovan, as well as two other of the company's executives. In a statement to CBS Money Watch, Donovan said his company categorically denies the allegations by CFPB and states, Libre by Nexus is committed to fighting for immigrants scarred by the torture of civil immigration detention. While we have fought to release tens of thousands of immigrants from detention, especially during the last 4 years, the attorneys general have taken time and money to investigate our company. Donovan also said his company is proud of its work and believes sunlight is the best disinfectant. We plan to vigorously defend this suit and prevail at trial. There's a big difference here between the accusation and the defense. Somebody is not telling the truth. Nexus was founded in 2013 by Donovan and his husband, Richard Moore, who is also named in the suit. Donovan and Moore have said they were inspired to launch Libre, which means free in Spanish, because of their own experiences. Both have spent time behind bars after being convicted for writing bad checks. Court filings have showed that the company's annual profits more than doubled in the last decade to $60 million, as President Donald Trump increased efforts to arrest immigrants. In a call with reporters on Monday, Virginia Attorney General Mark Herring said the federal government's suit against Nexus was years in the making and that the company's misconduct goes back to at least 2014. In July, Nexus paid $5.5 million to settle a case with the California Insurance Commission, also agreeing to cease issuing immigration bonds in the state. The case claimed that Nexus was transacting in bail bonds without being properly licensed. Nexus paid the fine without admitting wrongdoing. In December, Nexus settled a similar case in Virginia by paying a $425,000 fine and agreeing to lower its fees in the state. At the time, the Washington Post reported that the company was under investigation by at least 9 federal and state government agencies, including the U.S. Department of Justice. New York Attorney General Letitia James on Monday described Nexus's ankle bracelet as shackled. Libre by Nexus engaged in deceptive practices that targeted our nation's most vulnerable population, placing profits above the lives of human beings, she said. Okay, now here's an example. Here's a story. The complaint is this thing. The defense is way over here. Oh, no. All of that is absolutely, categorically untrue. And then you get a little more information about the company, and it's like, okay, California, they were sued and settled. Virginia, they sued and paid a fine. I suspect, personally, I would suspect that they're bad news, but who knows? Maybe not. And there's another story about that. I won't bother reading that because it's pretty much the same thing. Okay. Here's something interesting. This is called the blind spot in the immigration debate. The change in immigration policy that could most affect the U.S.'s long-term economic growth is at risk of falling out of the debate as the congressional maneuvering over the volatile issue intensifies. With Republicans, under the shadow of former President Donald Trump, still mostly opposing all forms of immigration, and many Democrats narrowing their focus towards legalizing as many undocumented immigrants as possible, revisions to the nation's system of legal immigration may lack a plausible pathway to congressional passage, many participants in the legislative discussions say. Yet immigration experts and economists across the ideological spectrum agree that increasing the future flow of legal immigrants will be essential to driving economic growth and maintaining a sustainable balance between the number of working-age people paying taxes and retired Americans drawing benefits through Social Security, Medicare, and other entitlements for the elderly. That pressure is especially acute because the latest census data suggests the nation's population may have grown more slowly from 2010 to 2020 than over any other 10-year span in American history. An ominous dynamic that received little attention from either party. Without immigration, it becomes increasingly impossible to sustain entitlements, much less a functioning healthcare system, or a local tax base in rural and suburban cities and communities across the nation, says Ali Noorani, president of the National Immigration Forum, a centrist immigration advocacy group. Douglas Holtz-Eakin, president of the center-right American Action Forum, echoes his warning. Given the slowdown in the growth of the working-age population, he says, in the absence of immigration, the U.S. becomes Japan. We become smaller in size, older, less economically potent, and less capable of projecting our values on our global stage. After Trump sought to slash legal immigration through legislative and administrative action, the legislative proposals introduced last week by President Joe Biden and congressional Democrats would boost the number of new arrivals to a much greater extent than initial reactions to the bills recognized, according to a new analysis shared exclusively with CNN by Stuart Anderson, executive director of the National Foundation for American Policy, a public policy group that studies immigration. The bill would end up significantly increasing the legal immigration level, and that should have a significant benefit demographically, Anderson told me. But those proposals could quickly fall out of the immigration debate if Democrats conclude that they have no chance of winning enough Republican support to pass a comprehensive bill, and instead narrow their efforts to legalize big chunks of the undocumented population, such as young undocumented people brought to the U.S. by their parents, through the budget reconciliation process, which requires only a majority vote in the Senate. Legal immigration is really the orphan child in all of this, says David Beer, an immigration policy analyst at the libertarian Cato Institute. That's likely to change only if enough Senate Republicans are willing to support comprehensive legislation that addresses both the undocumented and legal immigration. And that remains a long shot, as the GOP's electoral coalition in the Trump era has grown even more dependent on the voters most uneasy about immigration in particular, and the nation's growing racial and religious diversity in general. All of this year's legislative calculations about immigration are shaped by the failures of 2006 and 2013. President Bush and Barack Obama tried to pass comprehensive immigration bills that balanced legalization for the roughly 11 million undocumented immigrants, a Democratic priority, with tougher border enforcement, the top Republican goal, and changes in the legal immigration system, mostly a concern of the business community and a source of ambivalence, if not hostility, from organized labor. Both in 2006 and 2013, the Senate passed omnibus bills with bipartisan majorities,